Well, it's hard to believe, but this is the 200th episode of the DoughRoller Money Podcast. If you're new to the show, my name is Rob Berger. I am the founder of DoughRoller.net and the host of this podcast. And it's just amazing to me that we are at number 200. I started this podcast back on Veterans Day in November of 2013, so a little over 2 years ago, and somehow we've managed to produce 200 shows. And I'm recording this podcast on December 31st, 2015, so it seems fitting on the last day of 2015 to record the 200th episode. And for some reason, I think I've been avoiding this podcast. I wanted to record it and publish it about a week ago, and we've been in the middle of the holidays, but something just kept holding me back. I don't know what it was, because God willing, there's going to be a 201st episode here. In fact, in just a couple of days, but somehow this one just seemed bigger and more important than a typical show. Probably it ain't, but that's how it felt. As I'd mentioned in the last couple of shows, what we're going to do today is talk a little bit about my story of creating DoughRoller, DoughRoller.net as a blog to begin with, and then eventually a newsletter that's free that goes out every Saturday, and this podcast. And that's what it's going to be about. But I'm also going to talk about the future. I'm going to talk about what I have planned for DoughRoller going into 2016, as well as that's going to include my plan to hire some additional freelance writers. So if you love to write or you know someone who does, stay tuned for that. I'm going to talk about what specifically I'm looking for at the end of the show when we get to the future for this podcast and the blog as we move into 2016. And the sort of the inspiration for this episode was the fact that of all of the email that I receive, if I added them all up, the one question I get the most deals with: how do you start a blog? How do you turn a blog into a business? How do you podcast? How does that work? And so I kind of hope that this show will answer a lot of those questions. We're not going to get too far down into the weeds in terms of technical issues, although I will talk about how to set up a blog. It's pretty simple. But my hope is that I get this same question in the future. I can just say, hey, I got you covered. Go listen to podcast 200. And then if you still have questions, let me know. Now, one of the things I did in the Facebook group, the private Facebook group that we have, is I mentioned this episode there and asked for folks to list some questions that they might have. And a lot of folks responded. So as part of the show, I'm going to answer a lot of those questions as they relate to blogging and podcasting. If you're not part of the Facebook group, just go to DoughRoller.net/Facebook group, and that'll redirect you to the page where you need to go on Facebook, and you can get access. It's very simple, but it's a very lively and robust group of folks. If you're one of them, thank you so much for being part of that. I'm still amazed at how someone will ask a question, and before I can even get to it, there are half a dozen really helpful responses, and that's exactly what I'd hoped for the Facebook group. So again, DoughRoller.net/Facebook. /Facebook group. That's what you need, DoughRoller.net/Facebook group. So with that, let's jump right into it. So DoughRoller, my wife likes to tell this story. I complained to her back in 2007 that I was a little bit bored with my career as a lawyer, and her response was, get a hobby. And so I took her up on that advice. And initially, my plan was to start doing sort of woodworking type stuff. I like the idea of working with my hands and building something, and in the home that we bought in 2004, there's a workshop. It's one of those deals. It's connected to the house, but you can't get to it from inside the house. You've got to walk out our back door, which is a walkout basement, turn to your right, go about 10 feet, and there's double doors. And you sort of, in effect, walk back into the house, into this room that's about 25 feet by 15 feet, concrete floor, cinder block brick construction, it's all, ceiling lights, heated and cooled, power. And I think the previous owner had this built with the plans of a workshop, as best I could tell. And so that's what I thought I'd do. I would, do some woodworking. So I started out on buying some tools. I even built a workbench, which if you look at it, you'd say, Rob, it's probably a good thing you didn't continue on that course. But that's what I did. And I was going to get a table saw. And I was searching for table saws and on the internet. And as I was searching for table saws, I came across a site called, I'm pretty sure I'm looking it up now to make sure I get this right. Yeah, 2millionblog.com. So it's the number 2 and then millionblog.com. I came across, I don't know how. I was searching for table saws. I don't know how I came across this site, but I did. And I thought, well, that's interesting. Here's someone that's just set up their own website. It's about personal finance and investing. And they're blogging. They're writing articles about, their finances. They actually record their net worth and publish that on their blog. And I noticed, at least at the time, it looks like I'm looking at their site now. It's no longer there. But, back in 2007, they had a list of personal finance blogs that they linked to. And that sort of opened me up to this world of personal finance bloggers, the likes of GetRichSlowly.org and Bargaineering.com and TheSimpleDollar.com and 5 Cent Nickel and others that you may have heard of. And I thought, well, this is interesting. And I thought, I'm not a very good woodworker and I love technology. I've never started a website, but how hard can it be? And I love personal finance and investing. I had just committed 2 years earlier to be out of debt by the time I was 50. And so I was very focused on our finances. And it just struck a chord. And I said, why not? And of course, I knew nothing about starting a blog. I had no idea how to start a website. And I spent hours and hours and hours searching the internet, Googling everything. How do you start a website? I eventually very quickly learned that most websites are powered by software called WordPress. The good news there, it's free. I realized I had to have a domain name, a URL, so people could go find my site. I picked DoughRoller.net. I needed hosting. I figured that out. I hosted with a company called Bluehost, and I'll talk a little bit about this in the show. And I started blogging and just started writing articles. And I don't know why I was compelled to do it, but I literally, for 2 years, I started in May of 2007. For 2 years, 7 days a week, and I'm not exaggerating, I would wake up at 5 a.m. every day. I would work on the sites from about 5 till 7 or 7:30. On a weekday, I would then get ready for work. At the time, I took the subway, the metro, in Washington, D.C. I took it from Virginia to downtown to my job. I would work on the train, had my laptop. I would work virtually every lunch hour. I'd go somewhere to eat by myself and open my laptop and I'd work. And then at nights, I would work after the family went to bed. So I was spending at a minimum 2 hours a day, but more like 3 or 4 hours a day on top of an 8-hour-a-day job. And on top of, a family. At that point, our kids were, I guess, in middle school. It's kind of hard to believe. It's almost 9 years ago. And, so there was a lot going on. It was a very, very busy time. But that's what I did. I was just somehow driven to do this. And at the time, it was not motivated by money, as you'll hear in a minute. Although I knew a blog or website could certainly make money. You can advertise on a blog, for example. And I put advertisements up very, very early on. It wasn't motivated by money. I didn't pick the topic because I thought it would be a good topic financially. It was just what I was interested in, personal finance and investing. It just fit. And so I started blogging and trying to post a new article and sometimes 2 articles every single day. And that's what I did. And it was a lot of fun. And of course, I would publish these articles and no one would read them because no one had ever heard of DoughRoller.net. And just to give you an idea, so I started in May of 2007. One of the ways I tried to make money from the blog was in something called Google AdSense. You can Google it if you want, but it's a code that you can put on your site. And from that code, Google will figure out what each page of your site is about and then display relevant ads to those that come to your site. And if they click on them, you make some money. And the way Google AdSense works is you have to have generated $100 in commissions or advertising fees before they will send you a check or a direct deposit. So it took me 6 months to earn a combined total of $100 so that I could get my first paycheck from Google AdSense. So here I am up at 5 a.m., working 2, 3, 4 hours a day in addition to a full-time job and a family. And over 6 months, I made $100. And that's the way it was. And it was okay. I wasn't discouraged. Again, my motivation, certainly the fact that it could make money was appealing to me, but that was by no means my primary motivation. And frankly, as I look back on it, I'm kind of surprised I was driven as much as I was to do this because there were so little returns. And I knew no one. I didn't know any other bloggers. I didn't really know anyone at finance companies or banks or credit card companies or credit scoring companies. No one in the industry. I knew nobody. And so for the first 6 months, I just wrote articles. And over time, from studying and reading other blogs and sort of following the industry, I learned how to let other people know about the blog, how to market a blog when you know nobody. And that's what I started to do. Now the question becomes, all right, that's fine, Rob, but how did you do it? Well, let me tell you some of the more significant things that I think had some of the biggest impacts on my site. The first thing that I did was I started following forums where bloggers would talk about how to market their sites. Some of these forums were specific to personal finance bloggers. And some of those, I think all of those forums, now that I think about it, are gone today. But there were several where personal finance bloggers had created forums to talk about how to, market their site, and they would talk about technical issues and everything else. But then there were also more generic forums where bloggers would share, their successes and how they're doing things. And I learned things like there were, at the time, these don't really exist anymore, but there were things called blog carnivals that you could submit one of your articles to. And a site would pick the best submissions for the week and create a blog post that listed the best submissions for the week. And occasionally, DoughRoller would get included in one of those carnivals, as they called them, and so that would give me some exposure. We didn't really have social media, believe it or not, like we do today. So there was no posting to Facebook, there was no posting to Twitter. There were other things like Reddit and StumbleUpon, and so you would use the social media of the day to try to promote your content, and I would do that. At the time, there were no podcasts, and I certainly didn't have mine. I didn't have a newsletter. I didn't have any email subscribers, so it was a very, very slow process. And yet I kept, plugging along, and within about 6 to 8 months, I had two very big breaks that I think really helped me in that first full year of blogging. The first was I joined a very small network of other personal finance bloggers called the M Network. M stands for Mulanomy. Mulanomy is another great personal finance blog. Pino is the owner and a good friend of mine. And in fact, at the time he lived in New York. Since then, he's moved down to Virginia, and I have lunch with him every now and again. He's now in real estate and sells real estate here in northern Virginia. But he had put together a network of about 7 or 8 personal finance bloggers, many of whom I'm still good friends with today. And they just helped each other out. We promoted their content on our sites. We had a private forum where we could discuss issues and share information. And that really opened my eyes. That was sort of the two big breaks. This is the first one. It was my first time to really reach out to others in the industry, get a sense as to what other people were doing. And it was absolutely critical. So if you're thinking about starting a blog, or maybe you have and you're struggling with it, you absolutely have to connect with other bloggers. I think today it's much easier to do than it was 9 years ago. But for me, it was in this M network that, again, doesn't really exist anymore, but we're all still good friends. Many of the folks in that network still blog today, including my good friend Ryan at Cash Money Life. And so that was the first thing. And again, I can't stress the importance enough. If you're a blogger, you want to be a blogger, you need a network. And by the way, if you think I don't even know where to begin with that, don't hesitate to shoot me an email, or better yet, join the Facebook group and leave a message there. I'd be happy to maybe point you in the right direction. Part of it depends on what you're blogging about, right? But that was absolutely critical. That was my first sort of big break, is that I reached out to Pino. I said, hey, can I join the M Network? He was kind enough to say yes. And then I started developing those relationships. The second big break came completely out of the blue. I got an email from a dear friend of mine. I didn't know her at the time, but she's become a friend, although I haven't actually talked to her in a while now. I think she's retired. Her name was Karen. She worked at MSN Money. And she said, hey, we love what you're doing at DoughRoller. Would it be okay if we syndicate your content on MS Money? And I'm like, yeah, I think that would be fine. And so once a week, one of my articles would get published on MSN Money. Now, That's a pretty big deal. Although you'd be surprised at times, it really didn't generate a lot of traffic for me. However, occasionally the article wouldn't be just syndicated on MSN Money. It would also be linked from the homepage of MSN. Sometimes Yahoo Finance would pick up on the piece and link to it on the front page of Yahoo Finance. And when that happened, I got an avalanche of traffic to my site. That was the first time where I thought, whoa, this could be a big deal. This is not just me sitting in my home, typing up articles to publish on a blog that nobody reads. Now we're talking about thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of readers that can see the content that I'm writing, whether it's on my site or on MSN. And it was also the first time where I think I appreciated the revenue potential, because when one of those stories would hit big on my site, I might get 10,000 visitors in a day just from MSN or Yahoo Finance. And that Google AdSense that I was telling you about, where it took me 6 months of getting up at 5 a.m. to earn a sum total of $100, I could earn, and I'm not kidding, $1,000 in one day. Boom! When you got 10,000 visitors coming from MSN, it generates a lot of traffic and a lot of clicks. Now, of course, that didn't happen every day, and many times, it might be months in between a big traffic avalanche. So this was not, unfortunately, was not my everyday experience back in 2008 and 2009. But it was a big shot in the arm, a big boost. It kind of started to show me the potential for blogging in general, and for my blog in particular. And so those were sort of the first two breaks for me in the first 6 months. Once I got through that and sort of had that network of bloggers, had this relationship with MSN, another thing started to happen, and that is I started to get a lot more traffic from search engines. And just so we're clear, by search engines, I mean things like Google, right? Bing, Yahoo. Again, before I started to blog, it never really even occurred to me to think, when I do a Google search for whatever, how does Google decide which websites to show on the first page of the results, or the second page, or the 50th page, which no one looks at? How does Google decide that? Well, it never really occurred to me. No real reason for it to. But as a website owner now, as a blogger, it kind of mattered. I'd kind of like DoughRoller.net to show up in some search results from time to time. And so after about 6-8 months and talking to my other blogging friends in the M Network and talking to Karen at MSN and other folks that I got to meet along the way, I started to realize there's a whole industry on search engine optimization, SEO. That is trying to do things so that your website ranks high in Google for terms relevant to your site. And a lot of that depends on other sites linking to you. When another site links to your blog or website, if it's relevant and it's a good quality site linking to you, Google looks at that as sort of a vote of confidence. There's one vote for DoughRoller.net because MSN, the editors there, thought highly enough of the work to syndicate the content and link back to DoughRoller.net. That's just one example. Another example, actually more current one, is I have a second site called allcards.com. Long history to all cards, but it's basically the way I envision it, and I'm still working on it. It's a work in progress, but it's a site dedicated towards cash back and cash rewards, mainly credit cards, but also, deals you can get on bank accounts, brokerage accounts. I love that sort of thing. And it can be a little confusing. And so I've got this site about that. And again, it's still a work in progress. But 2 days ago, I saw that Harper's Bazaar was writing an article on travel, and they linked to that site, right? I didn't know anyone there, didn't know the author, had no idea they did that. But they linked to a page on All Cards dealing with airline travel rewards credit cards. Well, great. That's exactly the kind of thing that's helpful. And Google will see that as a vote of confidence for allcards.com. Obviously, it's just one vote. You'd like to have hundreds, thousands, goodness, millions of votes for your site with links from all different kinds of websites, if that's possible. But I started to realize how search engines rank websites, and I understood that links were a big part of that. And it was gradual. So in the first 6 months, I got almost no search engine traffic. It was a brand new site. None of the search engines knew anything about DoughRoller.net. I didn't have any links to start with, of course. And even after 6 months, I didn't have that many. And I didn't have all that much content. Even 1 or 2 articles a day for 6 months is nothing if you compare it to, major news or finance sites that have, tens of thousands of pages. My little blog with maybe 100 articles was nothing. But over time, gradually, as more and more sites learned of DoughRoller.net, and I got links from other sites, and I developed what I thought and hope is really good content, the search engine traffic grew. And when the search engine traffic grew, I started to make a little bit more money. Still I told you in 2007, I think I made a sum total of $100. 2008 was much better. I mean, it wasn't the kind of money that I could live on. But it was, it was a nice chunk of change. We actually decided to give half of it to charity in 2008, which we did. But it was starting to grow. And again, a lot of that was from search engine traffic. And as I moved into 2009 and 2010, I think I'm going to be transparent here. I think I took the site in a direction that wasn't the best. I think I became too focused on search engine traffic. And writing content that I thought would do well in search engines. And I think the practical matter, it was great to get that traffic, both to have readers to the site, and it also over time would generate income through things like Google AdSense or affiliate offers, which I've talked about in the past, where, for example, if I have a link to a bank account, someone opens up a bank account at a bank and I get a small commission, which is a standard way for blogs and websites for that matter. To generate revenue. I think I got a little too focused on that. And so I started writing content specifically for search engines. Now, I still think it was good content, but I was too focused on the search engine side of things. And I think I lost my way. I think the site lost its way. If I go back to that content today, and I often do, and I often update it, I think it's good content. But I would have never, for example, back then created this podcast to share my story, because this podcast isn't going to, even if I attach to an article, it's probably not going to rank well in Google. It's my story, right? I would have never created this kind of content in 2009 or 2010. But that's what I was doing there. Now, on the bright side, it worked. And I got a lot of traffic. My traffic grew in 2009. It grew in 2010. And the revenue grew. And by 2009, I was at a point where I was making enough money that I could quit my job as a lawyer if I wanted to and blog full time. Now, I didn't do that, obviously, and I'm going to talk a bit about why later in the show. But that's where I was by 2009. So I started this in May of 2007, made nothing virtually in 2007, made a little bit in 2008. But by 2009, I could make a full-time living. Now, again, that was 2 years of working 2, 3, 4, 5 hours a day, getting up at 5 a.m. So I guess one thing I want to stress, if you're thinking about this, is this ain't going to be easy. You're not going to just start blogging and making a lot of money in a month. At least you're not if you follow in my footsteps. It took a lot of time and a lot of work, but eventually it paid off. And as I look back, it was just kind of funny to me. It's like, I didn't start this to make money, and here it is. I could quit being a lawyer if I wanted to and blog full time. But I didn't do that. I kept blogging. I kept practicing law. And that's kind of where I was in 2009, 2010. Then in early 2011, I know this is just burned in my memory. This was a significant day. It was in April of 2011. I track the traffic that comes to my site through another Google tool called Google Analytics. It's free, very easy to implement on your site. Just take a little snippet of code once you've signed up for Google Analytics. Take a little snippet of code and put it on your site, and it tracks all your traffic. And it tells you where your traffic's coming from, if it's coming from Google or Bing or Facebook or whatever, and what pages they go to on your site. It's very useful if you have a website or blog and you're not using any sort of analytics tools. I would highly recommend Google Analytics. So anyway, I was looking at my traffic, and I remember one day, it's a Tuesday. No, I think it was a Tuesday. It was a Monday or Tuesday. Traffic was pretty normal. It had gone up significantly. I'd seen a nice increase in my traffic through the end of 2010 and into the early 2011. We're now in April 2011. And at noon, my traffic drops by like 60%. And I'm thinking, well, that's odd. Literally at noon, from noon to 1, the traffic was 60% less than what I would expect from noon to 1 on a Monday or Tuesday on a weekday. Boom, it dropped. And I thought, well, maybe it's just a glitch in the system. I don't know. 1 p.m. to 2 p.m., still down. And throughout the whole day, you can see it if you graph it. And I can go to Google Analytics and go back to that day. In fact, that's what I'm going to do. Let's see, I'm going to pull it up here. Yeah, it was April 11th, 2011. You can tell this day was a big day for me. So I'm looking at my traffic from all the way back April 11th, 2011, and I'm looking at just the Google traffic. And the day started out great. If I compare the morning of April 11th to the same period a week earlier, April 4th, the 11 o'clock hour, my Google traffic was up 30%. Just for that hour, 30%. But when you hit noon, it's down 9%. Then it's down 23% from the week earlier, 36%, 38%, 46%, 54%. That's at 8 o'clock in the evening. They had flipped a switch. I later learned that it was something called Panda. It was a major update in the way that Google ranks websites. And the theory behind it was that they wanted to de-emphasize low-quality sites. Talk about a punch in the gut. I'm like, what? I slave over this content. I'm up at 5 a.m. I'm sweating and bleeding to create this site, and you're telling me my site's low-quality content? Well, after a while, I learned not to take it personally. It wasn't as if Mr. Google had specifically looked at DoughRoller.net and decided this was low-quality content. They're dealing with millions and millions and millions of websites, blogs. So they were attempting to improve the quality of their search results. But of course, they can't do this on a website-by-website basis, at least not most of the time. And what I learned was the vast majority of personal finance blogs had experienced the exact same thing. All of my friends in the personal finance space, all my blogger friends, they all went through the exact same thing. And so you can imagine it was a big wake-up call for all of us. For me, this is where you have to decide how you're going to handle adversity. I was literally considering retiring from the practice of law in early 2011, and was just about ready to pull the trigger on this, and then Panda struck April 11th, 2011, and I decided against it. I said it's just not stable enough, because when my traffic gets cut by more than half, the revenue that I was making, as you might imagine, goes down too. And so I really had to reevaluate my website. And is this even a viable business? If the engineers at Google can make a switch and affect that many websites, I mean, literally, by the way, major websites that employ hundreds of people went out of business because of this change in the Google search algorithm. I mean, it was a major event for those in the business of building websites. And I thought, it's like building your house on the sand. This is just not good. I don't have control over what Google does. And so I was very discouraged. But it was then that I started sort of reevaluating my site and how I wanted to build content. And I decided a couple of things. The first was, you know what? Forget Google. I'm not going to create content because of what I think Google wants. I'm not going to market my site in certain ways because I think it will help search engine traffic. I'm going to completely ignore Google, and I'm going to focus on trying to reach real live people with helpful, useful content. That was my goal. And it was kind of easy because I wasn't getting much Google search traffic anyway, right after Panda. And so I started doing a couple of things. First of all, and it took time. This didn't happen overnight. I would say it happened over really a 2-year period, maybe 2.5 years. I started focusing topics that I would write about on content that I thought was extremely useful to regular folks. Now, that doesn't mean that content hopefully won't maybe do well in search engines, because it's, again, I'm trying to write content that's useful to people, and what do people search for on Google, but is information that's useful to them. But that wasn't my focus. Search engines, I said, forget search engines. I'm just going to focus on the content, and I'm going to focus on ways to generate awareness of my site and traffic for my site that doesn't depend on search engines. Yeah, search engines are still important. They're still important to my site today. But how can I diversify my sources of traffic? And so I started doing a couple of things. The first was my newsletter. The newsletter that goes out every Saturday. It's free. If you don't subscribe, you can. It's DoughRoller.net/newsletter. And that drives a lot of traffic to my site. I have 21,000 subscribers. So you can imagine when that goes out, I get a lot of traffic to my site. I also link to that in that newsletter to other sites as well, because I think that's important. My goal is not just to get traffic back to DoughRoller.net. It's to provide information that's useful to folks as they make important decisions in their lives about their money. So I really started focusing on getting more email newsletter subscribers and trying to put out a good newsletter. That was the first thing that I did, in addition to sort of refocusing my content. The second thing that I did was I wanted to start writing for other major publications. I had this relationship with MSN Money. That was great. During that time, I got the chance to write for U.S. News, which I still do today. And so that was great. But I wanted to expand it even further. And so over the next couple of years during that period, I started writing for Huffington Post. I started writing for Daily Finance. And then towards the end of that period, I had an opportunity to write for Forbes. And that was a very important. And I write for all three of these sites today. I want to speak a bit about Forbes and how that came about. Because one of the things I learned through the last 9 years is that while your blog obviously is online, it's the things you do offline that probably have the biggest impact. It's the relationships with real live people that you create that can have the biggest impact on your life, on your business, and so on. And the Forbes story is a perfect example of that. So I was in St. Louis, and this was for FinCon, which is a conference for personal finance bloggers. It's started by Phil Taylor, my good friend, who blogs at PT Money. He owns and runs the conference. It's a fabulous event. This past year it was in Charleston. Next year it's in San Diego. I've been every year. It started about 5 years ago in Chicago. It's been in St. Louis. It's been in Denver. Wonderful, wonderful conference. So I was in St. Louis a couple of years ago for this event, and I got invited to a dinner. I don't remember who hosted it. It may have been Ally Bank, but there were about 20 or 30 of us there, financial bloggers, and I sat next to Rick Ferry. Now, I've known Rick for a number of years. He's written some great investing books, including all about asset allocation. I've talked about him on the show. He's been on the show as a guest, I think in podcast number 2, I think. But I've known Rick for a number of years. We had dinner. We were at this dinner together. We were sitting next to each other. We just started talking. He mentioned he writes for Forbes. And I said, well, Rick, how do I get in? How do I write for Forbes? Is there a way? Can you put me in touch with someone? So he put me in touch with their editor in Washington, D.C. And with Forbes, it's not an easy thing. It's not like I just called up that editor and said, hey, I'd like to write for you. I know Rick, hey, sure, come on board. A lot of emails, 3-4 months of time, showing them the kind of writing that I've done in the past. It took a while. But because of that relationship I had with Rick and his kindness to introduce me to his contact at Forbes, about 3 or 4 months later, I was writing for Forbes, and I now contribute to Forbes weekly. And it's been a wonderful opportunity for me, both at a personal level, but also as a way to promote DoughRoller.net. And I even promote this podcast on Forbes from time to time, or mention it in an article. And it really, I think, also improved my writing. Because, when you're writing for Forbes, there's just that little extra, boy, this better be good kind of thing, because a lot of people could see this. And so, it really pay special attention to it. But there's an example of how one of many relationships that I had made through blogging, met Rick, we're having dinner, mentioned Forbes, put me in touch with an editor there, and here I am now. It's been about 2 years, I think, writing for Forbes. So through all of this work, I was getting traffic from other sources besides search engines, whether it was a newsletter, Daily Finance, Huffington Post, Forbes, U.S. News. And as part of that, I also decided to start this podcast. That was in about 2 years ago, 2013, as I mentioned, November, 2 years ago last month. And part of that was to have a different way to connect with folks and to potentially drive traffic to my site from other sources. Now, I think probably the podcast, as it turns out, doesn't drive a lot of traffic to my my website, but I think that's okay. Just from the email that I get from folks, I know that the podcast has been helpful and useful to folks, and so I'm going to continue doing it. I don't make much money from it at all. I don't, at the moment, don't advertise with it. There are a few folks that support the podcast, which I'm grateful for, but that basically pays for the website hosting for the podcast. That's about it. So I don't, this isn't a money-making part of the business, if you will. But for me, it's sort of, I see it as my way to sort of give back in a way and share what I've learned and learn from you as you guys email me. And now on the Facebook group, I've learned a ton from the folks there. And it's something that I think has really changed the dynamic of what I do. as I sit here behind this mic. So that all occurred again. Panda hit in 2011. I had to sort of rethink everything about my business. But through that adversity, I have a newsletter that's very important to me. I have this podcast, which is very important to me. I have relationships with major media sites, all very important to me. The irony, by the way, is I think the more I ignore Google, the more traffic they send me. So I'm not sure how that works. If you're a Google engineer and want to email me and explain that to me, that's fine. But I really do. I just basically ignore search engines today. And my traffic from search engines today is better than it was before Panda. I don't know if it's better in terms of absolute numbers. I could look at that. I'm not sure. But it's certainly better in terms of, getting people to relevant content on my site that can help them. And so that's, I guess, sort of the irony. I take my eye off the ball, so to speak, on purpose, and somehow become a better batter. I'm not sure, better hitter, but that's kind of what's happened. And so through all of this, I still practice law, although on a part-time basis, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But here I am. It's now the end of 2015. It'll be 9 years in May of next year. I've met just countless people along the way and developed wonderful relationships. And I'm at a position at the age of 49 that I could quit the practice of law if I wanted to. I could blog full time, which is, I think, generally where I'm headed, albeit somewhat slowly. And it's been a wonderful experience. So that's sort of my story in somewhat of a nutshell. Now, I want to talk about a few sort of specific details with you. So the first is, this is kind of a how-to on how to set up a blog. I'm not going to get into too much of the detail because I think it's better when you see it in writing in a blog post. But one of the challenges I had when I started the blog was I had no idea how to build a website. Never heard of WordPress. I didn't know about hosting. And I think today it's probably even easier than it was when I started. But here's the thing that I would tell you is that the technical side of running a blog is by far the easiest. That's by far the easiest. If you think about what is involved in a blog, and this is true if you incorporate a podcast into what you want to do, a newsletter, it doesn't really matter. You can think of what you need to do in a couple of buckets. There's what I call the technical bucket, setting up the website, getting a domain name, designing your site so it looks good or looks the way you want it to. That's sort of bucket one, the technical bucket. Then there's the content bucket. Okay, you've got your website. What kind of content? In my case, it's mainly articles and this podcast. That's my content in the newsletter. Content could be video, could be images, whatever. But you've got the content bucket. What kind of content are you going to create for your blog, and how are you going to create it? Then the third bucket is marketing, right? All right, you've got the technical side figured out. You've set up your blog. You've got your content, whatever that might be. How do you let people know about it? How do you market your blog? That's sort of a third bucket. And in that is everything from social media. You have a Facebook page, Twitter, whatever. Search engine optimization, right? You search engines eventually find your site and maybe send you some traffic. But it's the marketing bucket. And then the way I kind of see this, you've got those three buckets, and sort of encapsulating all of those is how you're going to make money from the site. Now, you may have sites where your goal isn't to make money, but certainly if you want to blog full time, or if you want to devote a lot of time to blogging, it's probably going to require some amount of revenue just to survive. And so that's sort of maybe the fourth bucket, if you will, or I kind of envision it as sort of encapsulating all three. How do you make money? Now, what I want to focus on just briefly is the technical side of things, because I think it intimidates people. And the reality is, setting up a WordPress blog is easy. You just need a couple of things. You need whatever domain name you're going to use for your site. That's the www.yoursite.com, right? The URL. That's the first thing you need. You need hosting, which is just a company where they have servers where you can put your website so that when someone types in your domain, it actually, brings up the pages. So you need hosting. And then you need software that's going to run your blog. As I mentioned, WordPress is what most blogs use today, and it's totally free. And that's about it. And it's pretty simple. So what I did, I used Bluehost when I started this blog, and it's the one I recommend. I recommend it because I think they're good. It's cheap, depending on if you sign up for 1 year or 2 years of hosting, you're going to get it for $4 or $5 a month. That's it. You got to get a domain name. You can also get that from Bluehost. And the trick there will be finding one you like that's still available. But when you go to Bluehost, you can type in the domain you're interested in, and they'll tell you if it's available or not. It's like $10 to $15 a year. So literally, you can start a blog for say $20, $10 to $15 for the domain, say $5 a month for your first month of hosting. Let's say it's $60 for the year. So you're at $100, under $100 for your blog for the year. WordPress is free. Now, there's going to be a lot of things along the way, like you may be saying, well, I get that, Rob. I can go to Bluehost, but how do I actually set up WordPress? Well, it's one click. It's literally you click one button in Bluehost, and it'll upload WordPress to your server. It's really, really simple. Yes, you'll have questions along the way. You'll Google a lot of things to figure things out as you go. One of the things I like about Bluehost is that they have good telephone support. And so there will be questions along the way, but that's really it. And for very little money, you can get a site up and running. Now, I will say a couple of things there. I probably spent too much time worrying about the design of my site. If you want to spend a little bit more money so you don't have to worry about that, I would suggest that you use what's called Genesis, which is a WordPress theme. And if you've never dealt with WordPress, it's a very easy concept. You'll figure it out as you go. But they have different themes that are very nice looking, and you don't have to worry about designing your site. They kind of do it for you, and you're going to get a nice WordPress theme for under $100. So if you just Google Genesis WordPress themes, you'll see it. It's one that I've used. I use it for DoughRoller. At the moment, I'm actually probably going to switch, but it's not because of any issues with Genesis. It's an excellent WordPress theme. I like it a lot. That's the first thing. Now, the other thing is I still have my Bluehost account. I don't actually host DoughRoller, though, on Bluehost. DoughRoller eventually outgrew Bluehost, although I think if I were still at Bluehost today, it would probably be fine. But I use a hosting service called WP Engine, but I'm spending, a couple $1,000s a year in hosting. And that doesn't include the cost to host the podcast. It doesn't include the service I use to send out my weekly email newsletter. When you add all that up, it's probably, I don't even know, $4 or $5 grand a year. The thing is if you're just starting out, that's you don't want to spend that kind of money, right? And so that's why I recommend Bluehost. It's where I started. It served me well. If your site grows to the point where you need something a little more robust, as I said, Bluehost today might be just fine, but even if not, it's very easy to transfer a site to another hosting company, or you can pay someone, which is what I do, a couple $100, and they transfer it for you. But there's no reason to start out paying that kind of money. So that's why I recommend Bluehost. Now, let's talk about affiliate marketing. So Bluehost has an affiliate program where you can sign up, and if someone uses one of your links to sign up for Bluehost, you'll get a commission. So I've signed up for that. Now, my site, DoughRoller.net, is not really about building websites. So I think the sum total that I've made this year from my Bluehost affiliate relationship, I think is about $200 for the year. That's it. That's okay. My site's, again, not about building websites. However, I'm going to give you the affiliate link. If you go to DoughRoller.net/Bluehost, that will redirect you to Bluehost using my affiliate link. If you sign up for Bluehost, I'll get a commission. Now, I mention that because that's one of the ways, in an important way, a website can make money is through affiliate links. And I want to give you a couple of examples of great websites that do that. Before I do, though, some of you might be saying, okay, affiliate link, I kind of get it. Why did you just tell us that DoughRoller.net/Bluehost is an affiliate link? Well, if you're a longtime listener to the show, you'll know that whenever I mention an affiliate link, I tell you it's an affiliate link because I think you have the right to know that there's money involved. So you can say, I'm not sure about this Rob guy. Maybe he's only recommending Bluehost because he's going to make a few bucks if I sign up. And that's a relevant question to ask. Now, I will tell you my own policy is I don't recommend anything that I either don't use myself or would use if I needed to. In the case of Bluehost, I still use it today, not for DoughRoller, but for other sites and my many of my domains. And I used it to start my website. It's what I would use if I were starting over again today. So that's just my policy. I think it's an important one. As you're building your website, your integrity is important. And you have to decide for yourself where you draw lines and where you don't draw lines. But for me, disclosure is important. And so I have disclosure on my website. I disclose anytime on the show that I mention an affiliate link, which frankly is not all that often. Maybe I should mention them more often. But in any event, DoughRoller.net/Bluehost is an affiliate link. Now, in the abstract, that may be a little difficult to follow. So I want to give you some excellent examples of, and hopefully this will also give you some ideas for your own site if you want to start one. But sites that use affiliate links to make money that I think just do a fantastic job. And the first one is if you search for digital photography. That's a big topic, right? I'm not much of a photographer, but I'm searching for it in Google now. And when I do that, sure enough, one of the first sites is digitalphotographyschool.com, and it's hyphenated. So it's digital-photography-school.com. If you click on that site, you go to what I think is a phenomenal website. This is as the name suggests, it teaches you tips and tricks on digital photography. It's a beautiful website. Please don't think that your site right out of the box is going to look like this one. If it does, by the way, shoot me an email. I'd love to see it. But this is really, I think, a phenomenal website teaching people how to take digital pictures. And how do they monetize this site? Because you can look at this site, if you go to it, you can see this. Obviously, they've spent a lot of time and money building this site. Well, they do a couple of things. One is they sell ebooks online. They sell ebooks about different aspects of photography. And they're not particularly expensive, but you buy one of the books and they make some money. The other thing, though, they do is affiliate marketing. They'll do a review of a camera, for example, and they will link to that camera on Amazon. Yes, Amazon has an affiliate program. You can sign up and you can create an affiliate link to any product Amazon sells. I create affiliate links to the books that I link to on Amazon. I don't make much money. You buy a $10 book, I'm not going to make much money, but that's okay. It's a little bit and it helps. In the case of photography, though, you go out and you spend a couple grand on some equipment, and this site can make a lot of money. Now, by the way, just to be clear, I have no relationship with digitalphotographyschool.com at all. I know, not personally, but I know of the folks that are behind the site, but I don't know them personally. But I have no financial or other interest in this site, other than I think it's a great example of a blog, a website that does a great job with its content, makes money through affiliate marketing. Let me give you another example. And I'm pulling it up now. If I can find it, let's see here. It's about swimming pools. It's called swimuniversity.com. I actually know Matt, the creator of this site. Great guy, funny guy. He goes to FinCon. And this is about how to take care of your pools and your hot tubs. And he makes money linking to products on Amazon, among other ways. Great website. It's a full-time business for him. And here it is, of all topics, swimming pools and cleaning them. I mean, who would have thought that would be, a full-time business? But it is. And it's just another example to look at and learn from. It's a great site. He's actually started another one that I think I've mentioned in the past, but another great website, same model, totally different topic. It's called roastycoffee.com. It's about brewing good coffee. And he monetizes that by linking to products in Amazon. But more importantly, none of this will work if the content isn't great, if the content isn't useful and helpful, and it clearly is. But I wanted to give you these sort of three examples. You've got digital photography, you've got swimming pools, you've got coffee of all things, as examples of websites that can be full-time businesses for the owners. It takes a lot of time. It's not going to happen overnight, but that's the thing that I love about the business I'm in. My focus, personal finance and investing, that may or may not be the focus you want. And but the thing is if you provide useful, helpful content, you can make a blog and a website on just about anything. And the thing is, maybe it doesn't become a full-time business for you. Well, what if it's $1,000 a month, or $500 a month, or $300 a month? It's enough to pay the car payment, or to get out of credit card debt faster, or max out your IRAs. Yes, I've always got to bring this back to personal finance, right? I think it's a great way to start a business, even if it's not a full-time business. Maybe it's just earning extra income. But there are several examples for you, and hopefully you'll find them helpful. So now what I want to do is respond to some of the questions that folks left in the Facebook group. And the first one comes from Mark. He says, if you were starting from scratch, would you start a blog first or a podcast, or would you try to do both? Do you think there's still opportunity in starting a blog, or have we already reached peak blog? Keep up the good work and Happy New Year. Hope you have continued success in 2016 and beyond. Mark, thanks for the question. Hope you have great success in 2016 as well. First of all, I don't think that there's like blog saturation. I mean, really the concept of a blog has sort of morphed. I mean, I don't know that there's a bright line between what you might call a blog versus what you might call a website. For example, if you go to Forbes, where I write a column each week, and you look at their website, guess what? It's powered by WordPress, the same thing that powers DoughRoller.net. Is Forbes a blog? I don't know. It's a website. But I think there's absolutely ample opportunity to start a blog or website, whatever you want to call it, and still do well. Now, I'm not going to pretend that it's it won't be, I think, probably more challenging than if you'd started it 10 years ago. I mean, when, just to give you an example, in the blogging world, in the personal finance blogging world, I think sort of the first blogs that came out in the 04, 05, 06 timeframe. And because they came out early, compared to most personal finance blogs you see today. And they were kind of a new thing back then. A lot of the bloggers would track their net worth and publish it for people to see. And it got a lot of attention. And these sites got links from like the New York Times. Hey, look at this. This blogger is talking about his net worth. Well, you're not going to get that same kind of coverage today because it's not new, right? Back in 04, 05, 06, it was new. And so what were those sites? Well, they were the Simple Dollar. That's one. Trent ran that. JD ran Get Rich Slowly. Jim ran bargaineering.com. Another example. Flexo ran, or Harlan, he went by Flexo at the time, ran Consumerism Commentary. These were all sites that were started early on, some of the first personal finance blogs. Now, just to give you an idea of the potential, all of those blogs that I've just mentioned have since been sold. Bankrate owns Bargaineering. A company called Quinn Street owns Get Rich Slowly. They also own Consumerism Commentary. A third company bought the Simple Dollar. Now, I don't know the terms of all of these deals. Some of them I do. Some of them are public. But I can tell you this: they all sold for 7 figures. That's right. So some person just started a personal finance blog, started blogging, got coverage, could make some money, sold their blogs for 7 figures. All of them did, and they're now owned by large corporations. So that was the potential back then. And, is that going to happen in 2016 if you start a blog? Well, the odds are probably not good. However, I think the odds are very good if you work at it, you learn, you keep going, that you can make enough money to make it worth your while, whether it'll be a full-time job for you eventually or not. Maybe you don't want it to be. That's another question. But can you make $500 a month, $1,000 a month, or even more? Absolutely. And when I go to FinCon, there's 500 or 600 other personal finance bloggers, all of whom do that. And that's just personal finance. So you absolutely can start a blog today and do very well. One of the topics that I've found interesting that I think would make for a good blog that I might start if I were starting over is one on home automation, the Internet of Things as it relates to your home. And, it's the kind of thing where I want to automate my home, but I don't even really know where to start. And I've done some research on this, and there aren't great sites on this topic in my view. That's one example. How would I do it? Well, I'd have a blog. I would absolutely incorporate video in that kind of site because people want to see it. They want to see you install it, whatever it might be with home automation. They want to see what the product looks like out of the box. They want to see how it works. So to my mind, YouTube would actually be a great way to go with that kind of site. And I might include a podcast. I don't know. To me, video in that case would actually be more important than a podcast. But that's just one example. Absolutely. I think there's plenty of opportunity out there. How I would go about it, blog versus podcast versus video versus something else, would depend on the topic. Would depend on the topic. But to me, the cornerstone of it all would be the website itself, and that's true whether you want to focus on a podcast or not. You gotta have the website. To me, that's critical. So there you go. Next question comes from Daniel. He says, "Congrats on the 200th episode. I was wondering more on the how-to stuff, like what equipment would I need, what apps and programs, any books or articles you recommend for podcasting." So that's specific to podcasting. So you don't need a lot of equipment. When I started the podcast, I kind of went overboard. I got a big mixing board and all of this stuff, and I've since sold it. I don't need it. I record the podcast in GarageBand, which is pretty simple, and I use a Heil PR40 microphone. Heil, Heil, Heil PR40 microphone. The microphone is critical. You need a good mic. You can tell a difference between a podcast recorded with a good mic and one that's not. I'm not an audio expert. I'm sure there are other good microphones. This is the one that I use, and then I have to have a converter. It's actually called, and I'm leaning over so I can get the name of it. The Steinberg, I think. Steinberg UR22. Just a box basically that I can plug this microphone into and then connect it to my computer. And that's all you need for podcasting. I mean, you need a website, but in terms of equipment, you don't need much fancy stuff. Now, the Heil PR40 is not inexpensive, and I'm actually going to look it up right now. I'm not sure how much it costs. You're talking $300, let's say, $300 to $350. So it's not cheap, but that's about it. And again, you could use a less expensive microphone. In terms of resources, one of my favorites is the Podcast Answer Man, and that's the URL, Cliff Ravenscraft. And he's got just great content on podcasting. He even has a course you can take if you want to. I haven't taken it, but I've learned a lot from his website. He has a podcast that's quite good. And that would be a great resource to kind of get you started. And I think that'd be all you need. All right. Next question, Dan, what is your vision for DR over the next few years? Well, that's that's a great question, Dan. And I have a very clear vision for it. As I think about it, Dan, I'm going to put that question on hold. I'm going to come back to it. All right. Richard asks, perhaps covering what you think about retiring from your day job as a result of it or not, and how that balance has been and what your plan is for the future. Well, that's a good question. I could have retired, as I said, in 2010 or 11. I didn't. And there are a lot of reasons for that, some professional, some personal, some financial. As I said, when Panda hit, I grew concerned about the stability of making money online. I now think it's a much more stable source of income than I did then, but it's not without its risks, like anything. And I also wasn't sure, you spend a lot of time going to law school, paying your debts, your law school loans, building a practice, learning whatever your specialty is. It's hard to kind of walk away from that. I think for some, also your sense of who you are is wrapped up in your career. I think that's common. I think that was certainly true for me at a point, not anymore, but it was at a point. And actually I didn't like that fact, frankly. I thought that was something that I needed to fix. And I have over time, but it's been a slow process. So, I didn't start DoughRoller with the idea of, hey, I'm going to quit my job or I'm going to retire at some certain age or whatever. But certainly, DoughRoller has been life-changing for me. That's not an overstatement. And it's allowed me to, frankly, do whatever I want to do. And that's where I am today. I'm still practicing law, and we'll see where that goes. I suspect that's going to change at some point in the not-too-distant future, but what exactly that means, I haven't figured it out. But still, I'm able to pretty much work from wherever I want as long as I have internet. The irony is, I mentioned that workshop in my house with that terrible-looking workbench that I created. Well, I'm sitting here in this same room, my workshop, recording this podcast with my computers on that ugly workbench. And I took a picture of it, by the way, and posted it in the Facebook group a while back. Maybe I'll repost it. So if you join the Facebook group, you can see it. So that's kind of what I do. And I my commute is 14 steps down to the basement and about 40 feet from the end of the steps out the back door and into my workshop. That's my commute in the morning. And I love it. And frankly, when I'm practicing law, unless I've got a deposition to defend or a meeting with a client, I work in this same spot. It's wonderful. And I love it. So in some sense, to me, I guess getting back to Richard's question, it wasn't so much retiring from my day job that was critical to me as it was the ability to work when I wanted to and where I wanted to. That was really my ideal. I'm not Mr. Money Mustache. If you said to me, Rob, if you could do it all over again, we'll figure out a way for you to retire at 30, like he did, and live on $24,000 a year of income. My answer to that would be thanks, but no thanks. I'd rather find a work that I love to do and do it the rest of my life. He's got a different approach. That's great. I've learned a ton from Mr. Money Mustache. I know many of you have, but I don't want, his choices aren't my choices, and my choices aren't his. And that's great. That's fine. So I wasn't really looking to escape the 9 to 5 per se necessarily, but rather to keep working, but to work on my own terms. And the website and the blog has allowed me to do that. All right, next question from David. Here's what may seem like a strange question. What are you looking at when you record a podcast? I know you are using your laptop when talking about specific things, but when you're just talking, what is in front of you? Well, at the moment, Facebook, as I read your question. When I'm just talking, usually nothing. I'll have GarageBand up, which I'm looking at now, and it's moving as I'm recording, and I can see that I'm at just over 1 hour and 26 seconds into this podcast. So sometimes I look at this. When I'm talking about something on a website, I'll typically look at the website. But I do create outline for the show in Evernote that I'll reference periodically throughout the show to make sure I'm covering everything that I want to cover and in the order I want to cover it. But most of it is just turn on the microphone and start talking, which I think probably my work as a lawyer has helped me in that regard. When I take a deposition, I took a lot of testimony when I was at the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board, and I noticed that you could divide lawyers into two different groups when it came to taking testimony. Testimony is really the same thing as a deposition, if you've ever been a part of that or seen it. But, you're in a conference room. There's a court reporter transcribing everything, and in my case, I was asking accountants, auditors, questions about their audit. And they were almost always defended by counsel. Now it's flipped. I'm now on the defense side, so I'm defending. But I've noticed that when you're taking a deposition or testimony, there's two kinds of lawyers. There's one who writes out every question in an outline. And at the PCOB, you'd literally have 300-page outlines. I kid you not, with every question they planned to ask written out, typed out, and they would even get reviewed by a supervisor. And then, sure enough, they'd get to the testimony and they'd start reading their questions, one right down the line. And that was just never me. It was like I'd have an outline. My outline might be 2 pages, 3 pages long instead of 200, and it would just be topics along with a list of the documents that I wanted to ask them about. And so when I got to whatever document, I'd pull it out, hand them. In the world of auditing, it's work paper, so I'd hand them a work paper on whatever, confirming accounts receivable, and I'd start asking questions. I might have my own copy that's marked up, but the point is I'm not one to sort of read from an outline. Never have been. And that's true when I'm taking a deposition or, questioning a witness in court or recording a podcast. So, David, I'm not really looking at much generally when I record a podcast, unless I'm, talking about a specific website. For example, Morningstar, I'll bring Morningstar up when I'm talking about it. All right, Richard asks, how do you come up with a topic for the week? Is it based on purely listener questions? No, certainly a lot of my topics are based on listener questions, Richard, but many of them aren't. It's just, I read a ton, so I'm constantly reading, and that generates new ideas, trying to look at maybe the same thing, but in a different way. Sometimes it's more of a news item. A lot of times it is questions that you guys send in or topics you want to talk about, and I certainly keep those emails and have a sort of running list of things that I know are interesting, are of interest to you. So I really look for topics any way I can. Other blogs, maybe another blogger writes an interesting article that I want to focus on. Sometimes it's interviews, and that's one of the things I want to get back to in 2016 are more interviews of interesting folks. But there's really no limit to how I come up with a topic. It's any way I can. And in that regard, if you have a topic you want me to cover, shoot me an email or join the Facebook group and let me know. I'd love to. It's a big help because it certainly gives me insight into what you guys are thinking about, what's going on in your lives, what matters most to you. All right. Next question. Why are you still working as a lawyer? Do you love it, need the money, or is the money just too good to give up? Well, let's see. Is the money too good to give up? No. Do I need the money? No. Do you love it? Not really. So why am I working as a lawyer? That's sort of a complicated answer. But I think I've got some matters that I feel compelled to see through to the end, or at least to a certain point. And I think once that happens, I'll retire. And I suspect that will happen in 2016. By the way, in terms of the money, well, I won't go into details, but trust me, the money is not too good to give up. You can make a lot of money as a lawyer, and there have been times when I've made, I think, what I consider to be a good income. Working for basically a large, my law firm has, I think, 1,000 lawyers or more. It's all over the offices all over the world. My arrangement with them now is different because basically it allows me to work part-time. And I handle part of that is because I only want to handle a very specific type of case, a very narrow niche. So yeah, in any event, do I love it? Not really. There are aspects of it I like, but to me, it was a career. It was never a calling, if you know what I mean. It could have been, I think, if I'd have done different things, but yeah, that's it there. So, and then her second question was do I have ever given thoughts about maybe moving overseas? No, not really. It's interesting. Our children are adopted from Guatemala. We've been back. I love Guatemala, beautiful country. Actually, gorgeous country. I mean, volcanoes, the lakes in Guatemala, the people are wonderful. But no, I don't really think. And I've been to Europe on many occasions. I've been all over the U.S. in terms of maybe moving somewhere else. But Guatemala and I don't see moving overseas. At least it's just not been a part of our plans. Although my wife and I joke that we're still trying to figure out what we're going to do when we grow up. So there you are. Maybe that'll change. Then Bron asks, are you financially independent? Is there a magic net worth number you set as a indicator? Well, a great question. So one, yes, I'm financially independent. What does that mean? For some, that would mean you could quit your job forever, not do anything to earn income, and maintain your current standard of living, till you die. Could I do that? Probably could. It might be a little tricky at times, in part because I'm only 49 and because I live in a very expensive area of the country, but it would be close. Maybe I could. But to me, that's not really financial freedom. For some it is. Again, we go back to Mr. Money Mustache and the early retirees group. That's exactly what it is. It's not really what I want for me. I want to keep doing work that I love, which would be this podcast, for example, and the blog. And can I do that and be financially independent? Unquestionably, the answer is yes. So there you go. I don't have a magic number. It's more about maintaining our lifestyle. In some ways, our lifestyle, I think, reflects where we live. But in other ways, it's very pedestrian. I'm driving I'm driving a minivan that will turn 11. And we don't, I mean, to us, a good night out for dinner is, it used to be Chipotle until everyone started getting sick. So now it's Cafe Rio. If you've got a Cafe Rio where you live, you got to try it out. It's phenomenal. Okay, there you go. All right. Rodriguez asks, if possible, can you please include information about the creation of an online business from the legal point of view, sole proprietorship or LLC? If LLC, would you use a registered agent or not? Any advice on tools or services to use? And congrats on the 200th episode. Well, that's a great question. So when I started my blog and decided I needed to do something in terms of the business side of it, I simply set up an LLC. I didn't use a registered agent. It's very easy to do in any state. You fill out a form. In Virginia, I don't know, I think it cost $100. And you think, well, yeah, but that's easy for you, Rob, you're a lawyer. Yeah, but I'd never created an LLC. And trust me, you can go through 3 years of law school and you'll never learn how to form an LLC. Law school doesn't teach you that kind of thing. Law school doesn't teach you anything practical. I paid a lawyer to write our wills for us because I don't know how to write a will, right? And I'd never created an LLC. It's one form. Now, since then, I am still an LLC, but starting this year, I'm taxed as an S corp. Now, there's all kinds of reasons for that, none of which have to do with liability. They all have to do with taxes. And there, what you need is a good accountant to guide you. And that's what I have. And I'm actually going to come back to that concept here before we close out today's show. So At a minimum, I would form it. If you're just starting out, what I would do is form an LLC, unless you have some compelling reason to do something else. An LLC is going to be taxed as a pass-through. Again, assuming you don't elect to be taxed as an S corp. Remember, if you're an S corp, you've got separate corporate tax returns to file. You get paid as an employee, and then the question: how much do you get paid? And if you have extra income above that, it's going to be a dividend. And is your income, your salary, reasonable according to the IRS? So there's all these sort of hoops to jump through. If you're just starting out, you've got very little income. Again, I would talk to a tax accountant, but for me, an LLC was fine. There's no reason to get more complicated. I'm a little more complicated now, but I think until this year, an LLC was just fine. All right, next question from Sebastian. He said, how do you get the first 10 hits? I think by that, visitors. If your stuff is good and useful, people will share it, but how will they know if no one reads it? When you're starting out, it does it. When you're starting out, blogging is a very lonely experience. And so how do you let people know? Well, this is where it's a slow process. But, if you're starting and no one in the business, which is how I started, today I'd be sharing it on Facebook. Presumably you have friends and family. You don't want to annoy people with, everything is about your new blog, but, share it on Facebook. And then I would start reaching out to blogs and websites in your niche, whatever that is. For the big guys, fine. Hey, can I write for you? If you're a good writer and your niche is home automation, for example, one that I mentioned, find the big sites that sell home automation equipment, and if they have a blog, and see if you can write a post for them with a link back to your site in the bio. It's going to be very slow. Find the reporters that write about home automation and reach out to them. Try to provide some useful information for them. New products that come out. Review them quickly and understand how they work, and reach out to reporters who might want to cover them with helpful information. It's in some ways, it's no different than marketing a business. Let's say you decided you wanted to open up an accounting practice. You're an accountant. What are you going to do? You can set up a nice office, get the best stationery, but no one knows you've done it. How are you going to let them know? Well, what you're going to do in that case is pretty similar to what you do on a website. Not exactly the same, but that's what you're going to do. And it's a slow process. But it's a great question, and it kind of leads me into sort of the next. And I know this is a longer episode than normal, so if you've stuck it out this far, thank you. And I'm going to try to bring this thing home. I kind of want to go to the next topic, which is related to Sebastian's question in an interesting way, as well as Dan's question. Remember, his question is, what is your vision for DR over the next few years? So let me kind of walk through that. The first is, I want to write more about this topic of how to build online businesses. And it's not just about someone who wants to start a blog about something, but maybe you run your church's website or a charity website that you want to work on making better and marketing better. Or maybe you own a small business. Maybe you're a professional, a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant, chiropractor, or whatever. Maybe you have a home-based business. And it may not be an online business at all, but a website could help you market, your company. I want to speak to that group in a way, that small business group that I really haven't focused on much with DoughRoller. I want to focus on that because I think it's an important aspect for a lot of people. Again, it won't apply to everyone. I understand that. There's a lot of content that you write, and hopefully it's all fits into a nice theme. But I could write about a 401k, and it might not apply to everyone because maybe they don't have a 401k where they work, right? So. But I think that small business aspect I want to cover, and not just the online aspects of it, but the accounting and the tax and the liability and tools that I use to run my business that might be helpful to you. And who do you use for payroll, and what tools do you use for your accounting, and what do you like and don't like about them, and what are the options? And the list could go on and on and on. Banking, how do you deal with your banking? Do you have a business credit card? Which card do you use, and why do you have a business credit card? Can I just use a personal card? All these questions come up, and so I want to tackle that. That's one aspect of DoughRoller, a vision for it that I have. Another one is, and by golly, I'm going to do it in 2016. I'm going to publish a stinking book. And I've been threatening this for years, and people are tired of hearing it, but that's one of my New Year's resolutions. I already have the books in mind. I have several, actually. And I'm going to be getting a book out, probably published on Amazon. That's absolutely one thing that I want to do. I want to start building tools like calculators and things. I've started some of them. You've seen the spreadsheets that I think I've developed two. One with the help of a listener on the investment tracking spreadsheet. But I want to sort of do that, take that to the next level, and build online tools and calculators on DoughRoller that can help you do whatever. Figure out whether you should refinance your mortgage, figure out what's better, a Roth or a traditional 401k or IRA. You name it. Now there are tools out there already. It's not like I'm the first one to this to this kind of thing, but I want to try to make them better. So I'm working with a developer now on that front. So that's another thing that I want to do. In terms of the podcast, I want to get back to interviewing more people. Interviews are a lot of fun, and I kind of moved away from it for a lot of different reasons, but it had nothing to do with a view that interviews aren't good. And I have a lot of ideas of people that I'd like to interview. And so I want to get back to that. Now, another thing that I want to do, and this kind of gets back to what I said earlier in the show about hiring freelance writers. Let me talk about that. So this relates all the way back to April of 2011 in Panda. One of the things we eventually learned, we being the bloggers and website owners, eventually learned in the personal finance space is that one of the reasons Google did what they did was that Google classifies certain content as really important for it to be correct. An obvious example would be healthcare related content. So Google is very, very careful. If you want to type in symptoms of diabetes or whatever, Google is going to be very, very careful about the types of websites it shows in its search results, particularly in the first or second page. Which means if you're just a nobody and you're not a doctor, you don't have any background, and you decide to start a website in the medical healthcare space, you're going to have a hard time ranking in search engines because now if you're a doctor, you're well known in a certain area, that's going to be different. Well, they applied the same logic to personal finance and investing. And so, there are a lot of great blogs out there, but we're just blogs. And so what they did, this is just my own observation, it's, I think a fairly well-reasoned one, is they really hit hard a lot of sites that they didn't view as quote unquote authorities. And the big names sites did really well. They ended up getting a lot of the traffic that the personal finance blogs used to get. Now, the interesting thing is that over time that started to change. Over time, Google started to soften that a bit. And I think what happened, there were a couple of things. It's my own assessment, is that some of these big sites, their content wasn't really that good. In some cases they are, but a lot of their content, I would look at certain keywords and searches, and I'd go to these sites and think, this is awful content. Why is Google promoting this? And at the same time, I would see similar content on personal finance blogs, not just mine, but others. I thought, this is really good stuff. And I think again, this is just my own observation. I think what Google realized when it came to money issues is that, first of all, not all money issues is there a right or wrong answer, right? If you want to know what the tax brackets are for 2016, there's a right answer and that's it. There's a right answer and then all the other answers are wrong. But what about the question, should I invest in index funds or actively managed funds? Well, there's no right answer to that. In fact, most of the important personal finance and investing questions don't have a right and wrong answer. And I think maybe because of that, maybe because of a view that some of the big sites don't always get it right, they started to soften their approach to what sites rank well for what terms. And slowly, over the last 4 years, personal finance blogs have come back. And you see it. It's not just my site. When you see a change that helps my site, I call up my personal finance blogging buddies, or more likely talk to them in a private Facebook group that we have. And sure enough, all their sites improved at the same time. And so I think they've slowly, changed how they look at the money side of their search results. But I want to kind of go beyond that. And so here's what I have in mind. I have 3 types of writers that I want to hire. And the first type relates to what I'm talking about in terms of expertise. There are certain topics where, and by the way, I have 3 writers now that help me. They're absolutely wonderful. Kevin, Greg, and Abby. I don't know if they listen to my podcast. If you're listening, you guys are terrific. They really are. I couldn't do what I do without them. And and the other thing I like is they give a fresh perspective. It's not always my perspective on the blog. They give a fresh perspective. But there are certain topics where, by golly, I want a lawyer, right? If I want to write a question about when should you get a will, at what point in your life should you have a will? Well, I can do research and figure it out and come up with something to write. Anyone could, but I'm not a trust and estates lawyer. And what I really want for that kind of topic is a trust and estates lawyer. And that's particularly true when you get into more complicated questions. Who should you list as your beneficiary on your 401k or your IRA? When should you have a trust? And should it be a revocable trust? And how does that affect your taxes? We could go on and on and on and on, and the questions can get more and more complicated. I want a trust and estates lawyer writing that kind of content. The question of LLC versus S Corp and what's the difference from a tax perspective. I want a CPA writing that article. I want a tax professional writing that article. So I mentioned I've got in mind hiring 3 sort of different groups of freelance writers. The first group are professionals like that: lawyers, CPAs, certified financial planners, chartered financial analysts. If you have that kind of expertise or know someone who does and are interested in writing for DoughRoller.net, send me an email, dr@doughroller.net. I can tell you I'm starting to reach out to people in my own circle of influence, and I reached out to the lawyer who prepared our wills and our trusts. She's terrific, a lawyer here in Northern Virginia. And I just asked her, do you know anyone who might be willing to write 1 article a month on this topic? And she goes, well, how about me? And I said, that would be great. So in January, we'll have a first article from her about when you should get a will. And it's a topic that I've gotten a ton of email from, and I've kind of avoided it because I just don't feel qualified to write it. Again, I could research it. I could come up with something that might be helpful, but not like she can. This is what she does for a living. This is her thing. And so she's going to be joining the group and writing once a month on those sorts of topics. Really looking forward to it. I'm actually going to reach out to the company that set up my benefit plan for my business, set up a 401k profit sharing plan this year and a defined benefit plan. But these are not the 401k, the defined benefit plan. I mean, you need to be a rocket scientist to figure this stuff out. I kid you not. An actuary has to calculate your contributions for the year. Well, again, I want to find someone who lives and breathes it. So I'm going to be emailing my benefit plan administrator. In fact, I should have done it by now, but I'm going to do it today and see if he or someone in his firm, or maybe he knows someone else that'd be interested in writing that kind of content that could be helpful to small businesses. I'm going to do the same thing, reach out to my CPA firm for things on taxes and small business issues. But would love to hear from you if you have that expertise or know someone who does. So that's the first bucket. And it kind of relates to what, I think Google looks at when it's looking at that kind of content. It wants to make sure the person writing it knows what they're talking about. And, the kind of content where you really want some 2, 3, and 4 letter credentials behind your name to be talking about this kind of stuff. So that's the first bucket. That's one of my visions for DoughRoller, bringing that kind of content to the site and to you. I've started, but if you've got anyone that you know, or if you're fit that category, would love to hear from you. The second category, so that's my credentialed category. That's my lawyers, accountants, CPAs, CFPs group. The second bucket is content that doesn't require, a fancy degree or certification, but would benefit from someone who is passionate about a topic, an enthusiast, if you will. And I'll give you an example. Travel hacking. I love the people that figure out how to travel around the world using credit card rewards points or whatever. It's the kind of thing where obviously there's no degree involved, but if you haven't lived it, could I write an article on how to accumulate 100,000 miles without flying, right, or whatever? I could do the research. Sure, this credit card has this bonus, that credit card has that bonus. Here you go. There's nothing wrong with that kind of content. That's perfectly fine content and useful. I want to take it to the next level. And I'm only going to be able to do that with someone who's an enthusiast in that topic. Now, I mentioned travel hacking. Well, what else? Well, I mean, for example, cars. Maybe you're just a car buff. You love everything about cars. Cars, are a pretty significant part of our financial life, at least for most of us. And so, content about cars, how to buy them, how to shop for them, lease versus buying, financing them. Again, I can write that topic, and it depends on exactly where on the pendulum it falls. And I certainly bought my share of cars, but I'd love a car nut who just lives and breathes this stuff to contribute some content. Or, I mentioned home automation. Part of my vision for DoughRoller, the focus is financial freedom. That's what, if you say, what's your site about? It's about financial freedom. It's not about retiring early, although it can help you do that. But it's about financial freedom. But, part of that is, okay, once you've achieved financial freedom, then what do you do? Or, all right, I will achieve financial freedom. It's going to take me some time. What do I do in the meantime? How does this affect my life? And so, part of that's just lifestyle. And when it comes to gadgets, I love them. I love home automation. And I'm looking into it myself, but I'd love to have someone contribute an article a month on home automation, or kind of related, but different, taking care of your home. How to do things to your home that reduce your utility bills, for example. Again, I could do some research and write an intelligent article on the topic, and I have in the past. I probably will in the future, but I'd love someone who actually does it. Or maybe you're a remodeler. It's another way to promote your website. Maybe you have a small business. You remodel homes, and you write an article about how to negotiate with a home remodeler. That'd be a great article. And you'd be the perfect person to write it. And I'd be happy in the bio of the article to link back to your site. So that's sort of the second bucket, the enthusiast bucket, someone who just lives and breathes something. I'd love to get an article a month or whatever. And these, by the way, these are paid positions. I pay for the articles. So, you would get compensated for writing it. But that's the second bucket. And in that bucket, I don't know exactly what topics I want to cover yet, but propose something. Let me know. Maybe you're a coin collector. I'd love to have an article about coins every couple of months, or whatever. But let me know. Let me hear from you, or maybe someone that has a real passion for something, lives and breathes it, and would be interested in writing, an article a month, or maybe an article every other month, whatever. Would be happy to hear from you. And then the third bucket is even more general, and this is the if you're the person who loves to do research, you love doing research, and getting that research down on paper. I'd like to hear from you as well. That's sort of a more generic bucket, but a lot of what we write, I'll give you an example. I opened up my first health savings account this year. Actually, it'll be for 2016. I have for the first time a high deductible healthcare plan through my employer. So I have the HSA. And I've had Abby write some content on HSAs and flexible spending accounts, which are different. She's got some more content coming, and she's been terrific. She's a great researcher and did a great job on those articles. But then I thought, how do you pick where you want to hold your health spending account? I mean, you go to these websites and they're not all that great. They're not like, if you don't open an HSA at Vanguard, for example, you could open up an HSA that invests in Vanguard funds, but it's not going to be directly through Vanguard. And so what are my options? How about just a list of the top 20 places to open up an HSA, and what fees they charge and what investment options they have? So I've asked my son to do that research, and I'm paying him, and he's doing that research right now. I haven't seen the results yet, but I will write that in an article, and probably sometime in January or February, and I think it'll be useful and helpful. But I want more of that kind of thing. And so these research projects come up a lot. And so someone who just, or another example would be, researching tools to manage your money. Now, again, Abby, Kevin, Greg, they already do a lot of that. So this is probably I mentioned it third because this is my third place bucket. The first bucket's the most important, credential bucket. Second bucket, enthusiast bucket's the second most important. But if you're I'm looking forward to it. The last thing I want to mention is this. I do plan, starting in 2016, to talk more about investing in individual companies. It's something that I've basically set up. It's been kind of a process, but I've now got it set up where all of my retirement accounts are in well-diversified index funds. I have a few actively managed funds in a 401k, but the vast majority of them are all in index funds. And that's in 401ks, IRAs, my defined benefit plan, an inherited IRA that I have, a Roth IRA that I have. I'm doing the backdoor Roth thing. And so that's all retirement related, typical asset allocation, index funds, low cost. And my asset allocation is pretty simple: U.S. stocks, developed country stocks, 10% in emerging markets, 10% in REITs, 10% in small cap value, and then I keep 10 to 20% in bonds. So that's, it's a pretty simple asset allocation. I'll talk more about that in detail, maybe in another podcast. But that's all retirement. For my non-retirement, my taxable accounts, it's moving all towards individual companies. I know that seems maybe counter to the whole idea of index fund investing. Maybe it is. I'm a big believer that investors absolutely can beat the market, and that may surprise many of you. I think most investors don't. And with mutual funds, the challenge is beating the market by enough to make up the fees that you charge. That's tough. But when I'm investing on my own, there are no fees. Even the trading costs are free because I get the free trades from Vanguard, 25 a year, and I don't trade but that much. So there's no fees that I have to overcome. And I really do think I can beat the market and give my overall portfolio some added diversity, oddly enough, from the market. So I'm going to be talking a lot more about that. Not so much my specific investments, because I don't think that's all that important. It's important to me, but I don't know if it's important to you. But rather analyzing financial statements, how I'm thinking about investing. I consider myself a value investor. So what does that mean? So that's going to be a part of moving forward in 2016 as well. I will be covering those related topics from time to time, both on the blog and on the podcast. Well, if you've stayed with me all this time, I'm not sure what's wrong with you, but I love you. Thank you. I'm looking at my GarageBand app as I cross over the 1 hour and 30-minute mark. I've been talking a long time, so I'm going to call it a day. I hope you had a great Christmas, a great holiday. I hope you have a great new year. I hope 2016 is excellent for you. I'm going to be coming back with a lot of podcasts in January because I think it's important to kick off each year right. People sort of poo-poo New Year's resolutions and all that. I've actually come around and think, no, they're really important. If you need the end of the year as an excuse to sort of think about your life, big picture, and think about the changes you want to make, fine. Use it. Use whatever it takes. And so I'm going to have my own share of New Year's resolutions, some of which I'm going to share with you in the next podcast. But I really want to kick off 2016 right. So I have a number of podcasts planned, more than one a week in January, as a way to just sort of reboot, rethink, make sure we're on the right track, make sure we're doing the right things as we move towards financial freedom and just, getting the most out of life, whatever that means for you. That's the plan. Hope you come along for the ride. If you haven't joined the Facebook group, please do, DoughRoller.net/Facebook group, the newsletter, DoughRoller.net/newsletter. Well, there you go. Hey, again, I hope you have a great New Year's. And until next time, which is just a couple of days away, remember, the best thing money can buy is financial freedom.